Welcome to another episode of Marketing That Actually Works, a podcast presented by the Growth Marketing Institute.
Once upon a time, marketing could serve certain purposes. But in today's economic climate, all marketing should be growth marketing, because as former McDonald's CEO Ray Kroc used to say, either you are in the green and growing or in the red and rotting. And according to the buyer moderation law, over time, the most buying customers will spend less, the lightest buying customers will buy more, and non-customers will start to buy. This is an example of regression to the mean in marketing that shows extreme purchases on both ends, moving toward the average over time, meaning your marketing should not only target heavy users, which is what marketing conventional wisdom always says. Instead, you should be targeting your entire category of customers, light, heavy, and potential. Some business operators think that changing the design of their website, hyper-targeting an audience, or loyalty programs and discounts will help grow their brand. Contrary to popular belief, this does not lead to growth. Byron Sharp, author of How Brands Grow, ran studies to show that loyalty campaigns do not boost loyalty levels in customers. Instead, focusing on growing the customer base itself will organically boost loyalty. What's more, marketing science professor Andrew Ehrenberg examined the success of 157 brands and discovered that the factor most closely associated with their growth or decline was an increase or decrease in their customer base. According to the IPA Advertising Effectiveness Awards, 82% of the 880 papers submitted reported growth from penetration, and only 2% from loyalty. The study shows that penetrating new customers, audiences, and categories is a more effective growth strategy than cross-selling or focusing on niche audiences. Growth comes from gaining new customers, and as more customers are gained, the level of cross-selling and/or upselling will naturally increase. While in theory, two businesses of the same size can exist, one with a few customers who buy frequently and another with a large number of customers who buy infrequently, the plain fact reveals that all businesses follow the same rules. They all have a large number of customers who buy infrequently. For example, the German laundry detergent manufacturer Persil at one point had a 22% market share compared to its competitor Surf's 8%, 41% annual penetration rate versus 17% for Surf, and 3.9 times the average purchase frequency versus 3.4 times for Surf. This shows that the higher the market share, the higher the average purchase frequency. Thus, an undying focus on growing brand share, penetration, and always acquiring new customers makes businesses and organizations grow. This is where growth marketing comes into play. Growth marketing is the process of combining branding and marketing to drive consistent, predictable, and sustainable growth at scale. Growth marketing transforms the traditional make a product, then market it approach into make, then market, then analyze, then remake, then remarket. This is because in today's marketing and advertising environments, strategies that work one day may be less effective the next. New tools, new channels and platforms, new applications, and new potential customers regularly pop up, and growth marketers develop strategies to be agile in pursuit of their ultimate goals, such as increasing the amount of new customers, sales and revenues, and customer lifetime value, while decreasing churn rate and customer acquisition costs. As such, growth marketing shortens the cycles of marketing and advertising rather than relying on extended efforts. Just-in-time and micro strategies and plans of action are preferred because they respond to the current moment's needs, and because most growth is due to an accumulation of small wins. The results generated by each campaign or piece of content help you learn the answers to key questions, such as, what are your key user demographics? What are your customers' jobs to be done? And how much are they willing to pay to complete them? And how often are your customers interacting with your product or service, and how deeply? In other words, your product or service is just as important to growth marketing as the marketing and advertising components. And the numbers do not lie. Companies with more than 40% of customers who say they would be very disappointed if the product disappeared have high growth potential. Ultimately, growth marketing is a team effort, and the biggest successes often come from cross-functional teams, such product development and management, data analytics, marketing and advertising, and brand management. The four main parts of growth marketing are acquisition, activation, retention, and monetization. The first phase of work in scaling up your acquisition of customers should be devoted to achieving two additional types of fit: language market fit, which is how well you describe the features, benefits, jobs to be done, and elements of value to your target audience, and channel product fit, which describes how effective the marketing channels are that you have selected to reach your intended audience with your product, such as paid search advertising or content marketing. In this phase, it is integral to talk with your customers, run A/B tests, and discuss customer conversations with customer support teams to get ideas about language to use in pursuit of language market fit. To identify channel product fit, you should, at least in the beginning, seek to find fewer sustainable channels of acquisition, not spreading yourself too thin across many. You can usually narrow down possible channels by the demands of your business model. Another way to narrow is to consider the characteristics and behaviors of your potential and current customers, such as the types of Google searches they are doing, the places they are shopping, and the social networks they are using. Brian Balfour, HubSpot's former head of growth, created a simple scheme for ranking channels according to a set of 6 factors, which you should score from 1 to 10 and then average the results and rank them. Number 1, cost, how much you expect to have to spend to run the experiment in question. Number 2, targeting, how easy it is to reach your intended audience and how specific you can be in whom your experiment reaches. Number 3, control, how much control you have over the experiment. Number 4, input time, how much time it will take the team to launch the experiment. Number 5, output time, how long it will take to get results out of the experiment once it goes live. And lastly, number 6, scale, how large an audience you can reach with the experiment. Keep testing and trying new channels as you eliminate ones that do not produce desired results. The second phase of work in scaling up your acquisition of customers should be improving activation, which at its core is about increasing the rate at which you get new customers to their aha moment. Start by mapping all of the steps that get potential customers to arrive at this aha moment. Create a funnel report that profiles the conversion rates for each of the steps and segments potential customers by the channel through which they arrive, and the conversion rate between each step. Look for differences between current customers, those who activated but did not convert into a paying customer, and those who never activated. Ultimately, to improve activation, you can either increase your customer's desire or reduce the friction they experience between each step leading up to your aha moment. Making a product or service more desirable is generally much more challenging and resource-intensive. In some cases, adding some positive friction can be good, since potential customers make a small commitment, i.e., sunken cost fallacy, and get to activation with more reliability. You can also do what is known as flipping the funnel, or allowing potential customers to experience aha value before asking them to pay. The third phase of work in scaling up your acquisition of customers should be bolstering retention, which has 3 phases: initial, medium, and long-term. The initial retention period is the critical time during which a new customer either becomes convinced to keep using or buying a product or service, or goes dormant after one or a few visits, tries, etc. Once new users have crossed the threshold of initial retention, they move into the medium retention phase, a period when the interest in a product or service's novelty often fades. The core mission for growth teams in retaining customers who are in this midterm phase is to make using a product or service a habit, working to create such a sense of satisfaction from the product or service that, over time, users do not need to be prodded to use it again because they have incorporated the use of the product or service into one or more of their routines. Finally, there is long-term retention, in which growth teams can help to assure that a product or service keeps offering customers more value. Teams must experiment with ways to keep improving the product or service, helping product development teams to determine the timing for and cadence of introducing enhancements of existing features or entirely new features. Communicating to customers that some new features or offerings are just around the corner and telling them how they will benefit can be a powerful inducement for them to stick with you. The key here is to keep refreshing the customer's perception of the product as a must-have. To maximize your retention rate, break your retention data into cohorts based on entry date, channel, and other relevant factors. For long-term retention, you can use a 2-pronged approach that involves on optimizing the current set of features, notifications, and subsequent rewards from repeated use, and 2, introducing a steady stream of new features over a long period of time. Another important element of long-term retention is figuring out how to move your customers along a learning curve. They should gradually be introduced to new products, or new features of existing products, and new ways of using them as they become more familiar with your product or service. Lastly, develop a resurrection strategy for when you notice that customers' purchasing or user activity has dropped to zero after some designated time, which you should experiment to determine. These dormant customers should be added to a resurrection flow, a series of communications, e.g., emails, notifications, retargeted advertisements, designed to win them back, often by reminding them of the aha moment or core elements of value that once drew them to the product or service. The fourth and final phase of work in scaling up your acquisition of customers should be focused on monetization, the goal of which is to highlight all of the opportunities in the funnel, from awareness to loyalty and advocacy, that you have to earn revenue from customers. It starts by returning to the basic mapping of the entire strategic marketing funnel. Then, analyze where in the funnel your business or organization is driving the most revenues, sales, etc., and where there seem to be pinch points, steps during which potential earnings are lost. Patrick Campbell, CEO of Price Intelligently, offers a wealth of advice about best practices for finding pricing sweet spots. To determine your value metric, Campbell recommends asking yourself 3 questions. 1. Does the value metric align with where your customer perceives value? 2. Does the metric scale as the customer uses the product more? And 3. Is it easy to understand? Pricing is often seen as a proxy for value, so lowering prices may not help increase your revenues, volume, or sales. The supreme aim of growth marketing is to design customer loops, a virtuous cycle of growth. Growth teams should be constantly innovating, diving back into the data, and coming up with new experiments. Push yourself to make the most of what is working, not only finding new things to try, and opening up the ideation process to your entire business or organization as a whole can help push through stalls or being short of ideas. According to Sean Ellis and Morgan Brown, authors of Hacking Growth, you should not move into high-tempo growth experimentation until you know your product or service is must-have, why it is must-have, and to whom it is a must-have. In other words, what is its core value, to which customers, and why. It is also beneficial to pinpoint when your average customer has an aha moment and why they do so. An aha moment is the moment that the utility of the product or service really clicks for your average customer, when they truly receive or at least fundamentally understand its core value, what the product or service is for, the job to be done, why they must have it, and what benefit they derive from using it, i.e., completing the job to be done. Thus, the key to knowing when it is time to start a high-tempo push for growth is simple. Can you identify an aha moment that customers love? To determine if your product or service is a must-have, simply ask yourself, how disappointed would our customers be if this product or service no longer existed tomorrow? And choose between 4 options: very disappointed, somewhat disappointed, not disappointed, or not applicable, i.e., most customers do not continue using it. If 40% or more of responses are very disappointed, then your product or service has achieved sufficient must-have status. If it is less than 40%, then you know you need to focus on increasing this number by tweaking the product or service or the messaging used to describe it. In the latter case, a set of additional questions will help point you toward next steps. What would customers likely use as an alternative to your product or service if it was no longer available? What is the primary benefit that customers receive from your product or service? How do customers typically describe your product or service when they recommend it to others? What type of person do you think would benefit most from your product or service? How can you improve your product or service to better meet your customers' needs and/or wants? Once you are willing, able, and ready to begin growth marketing experiments, start with high-impact, high-potential tests first. Testing small changes is unlikely to have the kind of big impact you likely want, and such tests will take too long. You need to identify the levers of growth for your business or organization, to summarize in a fundamental growth equation. The way to determine your essential metrics is to identify the actions that correlate most directly to customers experiencing the core value of your product or service. To hone your growth equation and narrow your focus, it is best to choose one key metric of ultimate success that all growth activity is geared toward. This North Star should be the metric that most accurately captures the core value that your product or service creates for its customers.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Marketing That Actually Works, a podcast presented by the Growth Marketing Institute. To learn more about how we work with businesses and organizations of all kinds and sizes to help them perform better, grow faster, and take advantage of other impressive results, please visit our website at www.thegrowthmarketing.institute.